Hello, hello
Hello.
everyone tuned into this cat conversation, and welcome to Keith Higgs.
Hello. Thank you for the call and inviting me to share with yourself and your viewers.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Keith, do you want to start off by telling everybody a little bit about who you are and what's important to you in life, what you've wanted to transmit through your life?
Well, my name's Keith Higgs. We've already had that bit. I'm an author now of 3 published books. It started way back in my hippie days.
Mm-hmm.
A rather wild experience under some certain hallucinogenics, where I decided that my purpose in life was to find God.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to a very interesting journey that maybe we'll cover later.
Cool.
But more recently, I've understood that God is love.
Right.
Love is everything. It's the universal consciousness. It's the energy that is this whole universe and beyond. It is everything.
So
And
the nature of God to you is not a man sitting in a cloud up somewhere.
oh, please, heaven forbid, heaven forbid. They've sold us that one as a way of keeping us under control in fear and shame. No, love is what we are. Inside of us, there is the beating energetic pulse of the entire cosmos, which is love. And my belief, I often start my talks with this one thing. It says, I believe we came from love, we are love, and we're in the process of returning to love. The issue is that when we landed here, we chose to forget everything about that to experience sometimes the opposite of love. In my belief system, that is so that we could actually appreciate what we are all the more, the love that we are. And we go through this journey created by ourselves, our thoughts, creating all kind of crazy stuff. Look at the world. And I'll take responsibility for that. I'm responsible for my life and everything that I see and every result that I get. And now it's a question of melting those blocks and remembering the love that we are and getting rid of all the other stuff that stops us being that love.
Right, right. So the idea is that we are these divine entities that have always been and will always be, and know that we're perfect love, and we've chosen to take this earth walk to experience what it's like to be able to choose love or not love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one other point that we tend to forget too easily, and if everybody realized this completely and fully, it would change our world, and that is we're all one. What I do to you is what I do to myself.
Yes, yeah. And I can feel the emotion in your voice as you say that. Yeah.
Yes,
So
if we only realize that.
yes.
And the other one that if we only realized is we are enough. We don't have to become something. We are something already.
Wow, now that really intersects with something that I'm struggling with at the moment, because I've been spiritual, I would say, for 14-ish years. So that notion is very familiar to me. But I've also been Jordan Peterson about 1.5 years ago, who's saying kind of the opposite. And I get him as well, which is like, you as you are a failed, useless, worthless human being who's doing your best in the world, but it's not good enough. So, sort out your room, get yourself together, and shoulder a burden and go out there in the world and be a force for good in the world. And I think there's a place where those two notions intersect, that there's a truth in both, and that when they come together, they create a power more forceful than any particular one. So like, I totally subscribe to you are enough, and I can see that when you take that to its logical extension without the other half, then people become kind of, it's a checkout a way of checking out of life rather than taking responsibility. Maybe that's the place where they intersect in responsibility. Does that bring up anything for you?
Yeah, quite a few things, and I think a few answers.
Great.
I agree with you completely on one level, or with Jordan Peterson on that point.
Mm-hmm.
That is our ego self, the self we've been dwelling in. The spiritual self, the divine being, is enough. And how to live that walk of the balance of the two and actually change the world that we're in at the moment is the million-dollar question.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
it's balancing living in the two places.
Yes, I like that idea.
I'm a student of the Course in Miracles and Marianne Williamson. And one of the things that she shared, which has actually become the very last bit of my book, is how can I serve?
Right, yes.
And actually she's decided at the moment she's investigating running for the presidency of the US in the next elections, which is
I saw that. That is amazing.
A total go-getter and change the world. So definitely one of her messages is don't sit back and let stuff happen because we are completely enough. Yes, we are, and the Course in Miracles and many other spiritual paths teach that. But equally so, we're in this world that we've created, and it's an important point to do something about it. Otherwise, we could have just all passed into the other world the second we realized that, and that didn't happen. So there must be something we're still left here to do, which is the world with love.
Yes, yeah, to express that love through our ego.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, this is exciting. Answers coming up. That's it's a rare thing to find answers. I struggle more with questions than I find answers.
Well, questions are good because they do lead to the answers if you sincerely want them.
Yes.
And you're prepared to hear the answer that Spirit is sharing, you know.
Yes. And it's a very exciting process as well. I think that's something that spurred me on to do these cat conversations at all, that by thinking out loud and talking with other people, then I get a bit further along my path. So yeah, we're doing it right now.
Yes.
Yeah, it makes me, when I hear you speak, it makes me think of the idea of ego and how a lot of spiritual practice up until now has been about killing the ego or deadening the ego. And I love the spiritual teachers that are like, no, that ego is a part of your divinity, and it's a case of being the master of your ego, yes, but using your ego to give your gifts to the world. Is that where you stand on ego as well?
Yeah, but whether it is still the ego that does that or whether it is the spiritual side of us that does that, that's the question I have that I still haven't completely answered.
Right.
In my first book, there is a bit which says basically, yes, somebody said to me, our job is to destroy the ego. And the message that I wrote about that in the answer, it's in the first book, is no, it's our job to bring the ego into line with love and let it know, and every other part of us that wants to have a say. And there's many other parts of us that want to have a say, and some rule the roost, whether it's the wounded child or whether it's the ego or whether it's the controller or whether it's the femme fatale or whether it is the masculine side or the feminine side. They're all striving to take control of our journey on Earth. We are the commander of our spaceship. And we have to stand between all those voices that we hear in our head and decide how to bring them together in love, how to pursue love with our whole being. Yeah,
I kind of imagine it like the ego is based more in the body, and spirit kind of diffuses through the body and comes from all that is. And so it's a case of filtering that love, that all that is, through the more physical aspects that we've got, like our ego.
I mean, who can exactly define ego even, you know, or any of these things for that matter?
Yes, yeah.
And I'm sure you have a different idea of it than I have, than almost every other listener has. We've all got different flavors about what we think a word means or a being is, you know?
Yes, yeah.
I think one of the worst things is from day one, they taught us that we are our body.
We are our body. Now that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Whereas we are a consciousness that is adjoined to this body for a temporary voyage on this earth. I love Wayne Dyer's, we're not physical beings seeking a heavenly solution. We're spiritual beings here to enjoy an earthly voyage.
Yes, yeah. But I guess the thing that popped up into my head as soon as you said that we're taught we're bodies was that maybe we're not taught that we're bodies enough, in that we're not taught to listen to our bodies, that there's a lot of wisdom that comes through physical sensation and emotion that we're not taught how to tap into. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, those feelings and where they come from is always the question. There are things in our DNA that says, if I see a situation that worries me, to tense up, let the adrenaline flow, and that is translated into stress in today's world. So that's not necessarily something we need to listen to. It's something that we need to observe and learn how not to be stressed.
Right, yes.
So some of those emotions that come through our body are not to be desired, whereas other, maybe the intuition, the warnings, the gut feelings.
Yes.
They're ones that we do need to learn to listen to, because we walk in a busy life often missing absolutely everything, the glorious sunset, anything where spirit speaks,
Yes, yeah. And I guess the human mission at that point is to try and separate out what is body tensing up in fear against something that needn't be there, and what is intuition. Do you have any top tips for making that distinction?
Well, there's only love or fear. So if you look at something and say, is it love or is it fear? That's a pretty good start to figuring out whether it's from spirit or whether it's from the fears and shames and all the different emotions of this world. If it's love, follow it. If it's not, for goodness sake, turn around and go in the other direction.
So using those emotions, or are they emotions or sensations, like a compass?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think a question about everything in life is it love or is it fear? Where will it lead?
Have you got any amazing examples of when you've been faced with something and you've had to decide, is this love, is this fear, and you've chosen differently and found, had an epiphany about understanding, differentiating the difference between love and fear? That might be a tricky question.
I'll tell you a story.
Great.
I think it regards to the fact that sometimes fear wants to defeat us from our purpose. So at the end of my journey of a quest for love, to find God, as I put it in those days, I had a very traumatic experience. And then I realized through that experience that the voice of love was speaking to me. The voice of God was speaking to me and telling me, fear not, telling me about my life and telling me to wait and have patience. And I knew something magic was going to happen. A week later, I'm at a pop festival and decide to go see some people who were sharing love, feeding people, singing to them, helping them. And as I'm walking towards them, suddenly the biggest fear in my life erupted. I'm shaking with fear. I can barely walk or stand up. I staggered into a marquee, which thankfully was empty, and held one of the posts to even be able to stand up. And everything in me was saying, run. But I said, I'm not afraid of anything.
Right.
And suddenly was in the circle. Actually, there was a little bit more to it, which is important. As I left that marquee, I'm suddenly realizing I have a substance in my pocket that I shouldn't have, and seeing a policeman. Now, I was never afraid of those things, but again, that fear attacks. And I threw that substance and watched a seagull that had been battling to fly into the wind let go and put its arms out and suddenly soar with the wind.
Right.
And at that moment, I realized I was in a circle of people singing and clapping. And that meeting in the next couple of days led to 20 years of doing voluntary work all over the world. living in
Wow.
communities. And
Tell me
that
about
was
that.
what my purpose was calling me to do.
Right.
Just before that, the huge test of fear and the inclination to run. And I think before we make major breakthroughs, sometimes there are those tests, and fear
Right.
and other things want to destroy the purpose of life. And we do have to go through those into the peace, the perfect peace on the other side.
Like a test of fire. Are you prepared to walk through the flames?
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Awesome. So what was that voluntary work that you did for 20 years?
It was Christian based, but not in a traditional sense at all. Almost a parallel of the Osho community, but from a Christian background.
Right. Wow, cool.
Yeah, it was an amazing time. I would probably still be doing that, but my kids grew too big to be dragged around the world and live in small communities anymore, and needed to explore a life of their own.
Right, okay.
So
But your
when I
kids
came back to
experienced
the
that with
UK
you.
and lived a different life.
That's amazing though, that your kids experienced that alongside you. I wonder what impact that's had on them. Are they
Some of
grown
them
now?
loved it, and some of them, when they needed their independence, decided that was not for them and rebelled against it. As kids do, they need to create their own life. It's part of the growing thing of not being dependent on mum and dad or anymore. I don't know how families in the old days when we lived on a farm and traditionally lived, but I think these days are very different now. The world is experiencing different things, and we're all having to find the path and break through, and the realization of what and who we are and what our values are ourselves. The different days, I think we have different learnings and different tests as we come towards what I think is the final time on this life, this earth, as we know it, as we know it.
Right, so not the end of time so much
No,
as
not the end of
new
time. Well, time is going to end because it doesn't really exist. It's just one of these other imaginary illusions we've created, you know.
Do you not imagine that time will need to stay here in order for us to experience this evolving that we're going through?
Well, there is a possibility. There is talk in certain religious texts or sacred texts of 1,000 years of the millennium, a type of heaven on earth, and there is time because it's 1,000 years.
Right.
Before it folds up, maybe there is a period of time where actually some of us are in time and out of time, and others are still in time, waking up and learning lessons and growing. Who knows?
Crazy, but we've got 1,000 years to find out, so a few more incarnations yet.
Or maybe we live 1,000 years like people did in the earlier days before the earth got so messed up.
Oh, really? People lived longer? Well, I knew people lived a bit longer, but I didn't realize they lived that
Some
much
of the
longer.
genealogy in the Bible, and I don't know if that's necessarily true or just stories or what, my jury's out on some of those things. But in the early days before the flood, and it talked about water or mist above the earth, and the earth was watered in a different way, and that would have been shielding the rays from the sun.
Right.
Then, according to Bible times, people lived 1,000 years.
Wow.
Years. And there's a number of people who are documented in the book of living a long time. Before the flood, before the earth was changed completely,
Right.
the layer of water above the earth came down to the earth. Now, whether you believe that or not, that's totally up to you. It could just be a story.
Yes, yes.
Makes sense, you know.
It's difficult to know where the allegories of the Bible end and the facts begin, isn't it?
Difficult. Very difficult. Who knows?
I guess.
Maybe they're true sand pictures.
Yes, yeah, maybe. I guess one of the things for me around spirituality, see how you feel about this, is that it kind of doesn't matter to me what's the truth and what's not. That I guess to put it in your terms, that the ultimate truth is that we're all love. And so the kind of physics of it don't really matter so much.
So true. So true. Also, I say to people, and I really believe that there are very few absolute truths. Most of our truths are actually thoughts that we've had that we repeat time and time and time again until they become beliefs. Those beliefs are by nature our truths. And everybody's got different truths. And there is only a very few universal truths. It's up to us to learn how to examine our truths and decide what serves us today and what was something we inherited from our parents, our teachers, our schools, our bad or good experiences, or our DNA even. And I tell people at the beginning of my talks, beware. In this talk, there are nuts. And after the talk, you might consider me completely nuts.
Right.
So take everything I share, chew it gently, see what it feels like, let it sink into your beautiful heart. And if it feels true to you, then swallow it, assimilate it, and take it as a truth for you. If it doesn't, because you will find your own truths on this beautiful voyage back to my belief that we're all one anyway, and we're destined to go on that journey one way or the other, one route or the other, until we realize, because there is nothing but just that universal energy.
There is nothing but
just that universal energy, and that energy has to, by nature, encompass everything.
Right, yes. And I think we're seeing an increase in that consciousness, that awareness on the planet, aren't we? With,
people are waking up much, much faster.
Yeah.
Much faster.
Yeah.
So many more that if you'd have had this conversation, or we had had this conversation even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they'd have probably come and locked us up with a white paddy wagon or something.
I'm not sure about that, but yeah, I get.
Yeah, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah, I do. So, I guess something that I'm really interested in is this evolutionary process that we're going through. And one of the things that I believe that may or may not be true is that at the moment, we've got this idea that we're ascending like this, that we were cavemen back in the day, and that we've evolved and got better and better and better and gone up like this. Whereas I see it as more of this shape, that we started off pristine, if you like, but innocent and not aware, not knowing all the choices that were available to us, and then sunk into choosing all the negative choices so that we could choose then that we don't want that and to come out. What kind of trajectory do you see us as having gone through, and why?
I don't think I'd ever considered it quite like that. Right. I mean, Maslow's, the basic level of tribal and moving up to the more spiritual levels, and they say that we're talked about levels above even that. But yes, in a way, the curve, because definitely we came from that innocence. Whether we chose to completely forget that when we landed here, and maybe 1,000 years ago, people's experience was different, and it would depend where they landed on Earth, like it does today. If you land in a war-torn environment where you might not live till you're 10 or whatever, or if you land in a Western society, completely different lessons and learnings that I think people choose before they come here. One of my beliefs is we sat down with all the people in our drama, all the people in our act before we came here, and agreed who would play what role in our lives as a part of the learning process that we came here to do.
So a connection there between predetermination and free will.
The free will's been chosen in some ways already, although there are variances in the path here in this life, I'm sure of that. I think the major decisions we already made before we got here, which gives us total free will, of course.
Yes.
It's just that this level of our thinking doesn't necessarily always have free will.
Yes.
We don't consciously say, I'm going to die today, unless it's a case of suicide. But I think we had destined the day that we are going to move into the different realm before we came, along with many, many other choices. And they say a group of people or souls or spirits travel together through this journey, and we recognize people from previous existences, previous places on our journey in this life.
So there's some meetings that just feel like a reconnection rather than a getting to know you for the first time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think many of us have experienced that.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe should I ask you to go back to your story, because I kind of interrupted you with not ecclesiastical, ethereal question, and then we kind of rolled with that. Can we get back to where we left off with your story?
Okay. Yeah. So I mentioned coming back to the UK with some of my children, and
How old were they at that point?
that's a good question. It changes every year, and it's very hard to keep track of these things. Some of them would still be going to school.
Mm-hmm.
I had a big family, 8 children
Right.
in my first marriage.
8, wow.
Yes.
In your first marriage, and more?
Yes, and then I became a stepdad to another 6.
Wow, that's a lot of kids.
At
That's a whole tribe.
one stage, there were 10 kids living with us.
Wow.
Yeah, it was kind of heartbreaking and kind of very different coming back and living a completely different life from the community life that I loved.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back to the UK with almost nothing. In fact, almost no money at all. We'd managed to borrow some money on a credit card to pay for the flight back from Sri Lanka to the UK. And I thought, what can I do? And I set up a computer business, primarily because I had been persuading big companies towards the end to donate computers and teaching people how to use them. And it started as buying a secondhand computer and selling it through the local free ads, and then 2, and then 4, and then 8. And then a business started to grow until suddenly, about 10 years later, I realized I had about £1 million turnover, which had been my goal.
Wow.
And I was blessed with a mansion. Impossible, supposedly, to be able to buy this place because I had no money outside of what was in the business. Not a track record in the business, which was rapidly growing. In fact, at one stage, we were in rented accommodation and there were computers in every room.
Mm.
Partner at the time said, if they get in the bedroom, I'm leaving. We had people queuing to talk to me. The kids used to entertain them almost while I'm working with one of them. And suddenly we decided we shouldn't rent anymore, we'd buy a place. And it was raised up to buy this beautiful place that eventually, some years later, was valued at £1 million.
Wow.
I don't know what it sold for, but that's another story.
Right.
I completely forgot about everything spiritual in the busyness of business.
Right.
And served customers, whether it was 7 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night,
Mm-hmm.
and worked like a crazy idiot for a terrible boss that was me, who was a slave driver, a total slave driver. And fortunately, looking back, although at the time it was hell, the computer industry changed and I was on the verge of going bankrupt. I wasn't sure that we'd be able to keep our house. The bills from the business, insurances and different things like that kept on, even when the industry changed and what we were selling was not selling anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think and see that as a total blessing. Before, at the time, that was hell.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure if we'd lose everything.
I guess that's where free will comes in as well, our choice as to how we see things.
Yes, well, there's no such thing as failure. That's written in my belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is spirit guiding us. And one, that life probably would have killed me because I was working sometimes 20 hours in a day.
Right.
Getting up and driving 2 or 3 hours to a venue. I exhibited at computer fairs. And that life wouldn't have lasted.
Mm-hmm.
And it was stopping me being able to take time to live, to love, to appreciate life.
Mm-hmm.
It said, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And rescued me, amazingly, with a network marketing business.
Right.
Which I did quite part-time over a period of years, and it has now helped me achieve a goal I set of becoming financially free.
Yay.
So now I've taken about 3 years, not completely out, but very much less, to write, to travel, to enjoy life, to meet people, to learn through different workshops and study, and got back on a path of what the Spirit wanted in my life.
Right.
Now being able to give back.
That's an amazing story of having in your life both spirituality and financial success, because I think a lot of us spiritual people consider money to be, you know, part, a bit like the ego, something to avoid and denigrate. So it's interesting to hear that you've managed to combine those two. I guess my question would be, looking back, would you have brought them together more? Like, would you have brought financial concerns into your 20 years voluntary work? And would you have brought spirituality into your computer work more if you had your time again?
Hopefully I don't have to live this whole thing again.
Once is enough.
The voluntary work was amazing, and I look back and think, how did I travel all over the world? I worked and lived in France for 6 years. I worked in England some of the time. I worked in India 2.5 years, in Sri Lanka 6 months, in Peru for a while, in the Dominican Republic for a while, in Poland for a while, even helped some people with their computer situation in Moscow for a while, briefly. And I don't know how we did it. We never lacked. We traveled all over the world. We had the majority of our children in different countries. And yet we never lacked anything, in spite of not earning and working at a job at any of that time.
So you weren't working for an organization. This was all off your own back.
This was all off our own bat. There wasn't a salary.
Incredible.
I was given the use of a house for 6 years for 1 French franc in France. Okay, we did fix it up a bit and we looked after it and made sure it didn't get run down, but equally so, what a miracle, you know.
It is
many other stories of absolute miracles. So one or the other, Spirit can look after us. Love can look after us. The other balance to that was if I'd have brought more spirituality into my computer business. Yes, I guess if I'd thought of it and if I'd had time to, but somehow or another, I was a time to see the world from the other side. And it led me, before spirituality, to personal growth. In the network marketing business, one of the leaders said, take a look at Jim Rohn and learn from him. And he was a spiritual man, but he didn't talk about it very openly. I was blessed because in the middle of the time when I was almost going bankrupt, I decided I need to go see him. And I heard of a meeting, a weekend that he was doing in Dallas, and made a pilgrimage.
Who is this, sorry?
Sorry?
Who is this?
Jim Rohn.
Jim Rohn.
Jim, J-I-M, R-O-H-N. Look at him in YouTube. There's some amazing wisdom in some of the things he shares.
Okay, we'll do.
One of the biggest points he said is, don't go looking for success. Become the person success can find.
Right.
He said, become a millionaire, but not for the money, for the lessons that you'll learn along the route. And some of those things, he used Bible stories at times within his teachings. And I was so glad I made that journey, because that was his last, and nobody knew it at the time, but it was his last public event before he got sick and died a number of years later. But he was the discoverer and teacher of Tony Robbins. And people who were great in personal growth and who are great today. When he passed, there was a online kind of praise for his life, and almost all the greats of personal growth spoke in that.
Right.
That led me to decide to sit at the feet and learn from some of the teachers of all of those things. And around that time, The Secret was coming out, and I worked with many of the people in The Secret. If I couldn't meet them personally, I listened to them. Some of them I went and crewed some of their events. Some of them I helped in their trainings and that way learned more about running events and helping and studying different things from the inside. So for instance, I did this big personal growth NLP based training, 6 segments. And then I went back and did every one of the segments as an assistant. Because you learn so much from helping others on their journey, much more than you do from sitting in a workshop.
That's so true, yeah.
And I guess that's where the foundations of some of the things that are popping into my head came from. Because it's almost like a boat on a journey. You've got to get it started, and then you've got to get it going in the right direction, and then it finds its way, you know.
So you were involved in self-development, but already had this massive background in spiritual voluntary work.
Yeah.
So how did those two blend together as you started your personal development journey?
Well, I guess the principles underneath of the real personal growth, because in my mind, too many people seem to be thinking personal growth is about making money. And it's just like that quote from Jim Rohn, become the person success can find. Yes, make your million, but not for the million. In fact, most people lose it anyway, but if you are a millionaire person, it will come back to you. It's about doing things in the right way rather than going out and seeking money. Rather than just saying, I've got to get wealthy.
Yeah.
Although, let's say I prefer to use the term rich rather than wealthy, because for me, wealthy is the ability to enjoy life, not the amount of money in my bank account.
Right.
Some people would say I'm not very wealthy if they looked at my bank account, but I'm free to do what I want when I want. I've spent 3 months traveling every year for the last 3 years.
Wow.
Enjoying life and learning from different workshops, festivals, experiences, connecting with people.
I think something that's really changed in my attitude to money recently is the notion, who are you not to? Who are you to keep yourself small and not make enough money that you can actively do good in the world?
Yes.
But and that for me was like a, oh my God, yeah, you know, I've kept money and success very much at bay, and now I'm thinking, actually, it feels like my responsibility to all that is to love, to give my gifts as widely as possible, and to perhaps be in a financial position where I'm not just affording rent and bills and food, but able to support projects that really excite me and do good in the world.
Yes. Well, I think that idea of staying small is one of the crazy ideas that many people seem to have. Money is energy. It's not a piece of paper. In the first book, there's a whole message about that. Money is energy. And loving energy and loving everything else is what we're supposed to do. So by that notion, loving money also, rather than having it as something aside that is kind of wrong. Money, though, comes from service. Money comes from helping others. If it is sought as just, I want to grab this out of whatever way I can, I don't think it can be blessed or last. Whereas if it comes from actually giving of service, of love to others, giving of yourself, then life rewards you for that.
Yeah. I love the word currency as well, because it gives that notion of energy and also of movement, that, you know, currency is alive when it's moving between people and projects, rather than the idea of getting money and keeping it.
Yes, hoarding doesn't work. It's
Hoarding.
got to be in flow. It's got to be in flow.
Yeah, beautiful. Good stuff. Okay, so maybe let's turn to your 3 books, because you've mentioned them a few times, but we haven't really delved into what each book is about. Would you like to run through those?
Sure. Okay, the first book is called Take Control of Your Spacecraft. and fly back to love. It's basically about the first part, especially an understanding of the programming, the autopilot that has been written in our early years. We come as a blank slate when we land here, and we're open to everything. And the only everything that's flowing in is from our parents, our teachers, our schools, our DNA, even the old, especially the basics of survival that are built into us. And many of those things and lessons were from people who were, in most cases, very well-meaning, but it was what their parents taught them. For instance, don't talk to strangers, or children should be seen and not heard. So you get up to talk to people, and there's a little voice that's so tiny you can't even hear the words it says, but just transmits fear that says, I shouldn't be doing this. It doesn't feel right. And until we conquer that and many other voices or little fears that are almost unknown but habitual behaviors, then we won't become the adult that makes our own choices and moves back to the love that we are. We're trapped in that world of being the little child and its fears and its automatic responses.
Rather than sovereignty.
Yeah, we learned how to walk, and it is now a habit. We can do it without thinking. We can adjust for uneven ground. We can make any changes necessary. People don't realize that we learned how to react. And now we react automatically before we even have a chance to think, what would I really like to do, me, the sovereign adult? We're still reacting in most cases as the child following what it was taught to do. And so the book is about awareness of that, awareness of the voices in our heads, awareness of the habitual patterns, and then moves on to some tools and ideas and understandings to take control of our spacecraft. The spacecraft is the vehicle that we're suddenly wake up in when we get here, and one day we'll take off like an old dirty suit of clothes that's worn out. Suddenly look down, wow, was this really me? This was me all along. I was the pilot of this thing, but it wasn't me.
Right, yeah. I guess that brings up quite a lot for me. I would challenge the blank slate thing to begin with, but I'm guessing you would go along with me with that we come in, yes, as a wide open to all impressions, but also with our very mature experiences from the past somehow in there as well.
Yes, although I think we've forgotten most of them.
Yeah.
They might kind of start to become aware later on in life, and maybe there's a point with children where they're fully aware of that realm they came from, but it slowly closes down from the teaching, stop daydreaming and concentrate,
right,
and all those things, stop
yeah.
playing that stupid childish stuff, all those things that we were taught.
Yes.
So definitely some children seem to be completely aware their imaginary friend is probably an angel, that's encouraging and protecting them,
Yeah. Something else came up for me when you were first speaking, but I've forgotten what it is now, so we'll have to let that one go.
It'll come back if it's important.
Yeah, totally. So let's move on to your second book.
Well, the second book is almost cheating.
Timeline here as well.
The timeline. Okay, well, the first book was now almost 3 years ago. The second book is called The Little Book of Love, and it's almost cheating. And it should have come first, but it couldn't. And that was, I was publicizing on Facebook and building a group. Actually, I've got a group on Facebook called Awake Your Dreams that now has 9,500 people in it in 100 countries. I'll go back to that later.
Okay.
But I was building that group, and also I'd been to the Hay House Writers Workshop, and they suggested to get books out, you need to build a platform. So I was focusing on building a platform through social media, mainly Facebook. And I was putting quotes from the first book onto social media on a daily basis, posting them in lots of different groups and getting lots of lovely reactions. And suddenly I thought, wow, I've got 50 or so quotes from the book that I've now put up. I will look through the book and find the juiciest quotes. And I turned those juiciest quotes into The Little Book of Love, which is an A6 pocket-sized book with just one very big print quote on each page, 140 something quotes. And it's beautiful because people flip it open and get something that feeds them for the day. The next book, I wasn't going to write. I had 2 or 3 pieces that didn't fit in the first book. And they were kind of sitting there. And one day in a workshop, I shared one of the pieces, which is probably one of the most radical pieces at all. It's called An Apology to Our Genitals.
Right.
And it's an apology for the shame of the parts of us that we consider shameful, that we've been taught as shameful. And how that we should feel love for every part of ourselves. And the beautiful senses that spirit and life has endowed in those parts. I read that part to the group and they loved it and told me, we need to get this to people. And a couple of days later, I was meditating and thinking about life and general directions and the learnings from the workshop. And the voice of spirit said, it's time to write another book. And I said, no way. It's not that I don't like receiving messages, because I do. And many of the messages, I wake up at about 3 or 4 in the morning and they're channeled. I'm transcribing as fast as I can.
Right.
But it's getting books out in this age of so much information. We're all stuffed with so many books, blogs, emails, messages, workshops that we're choking from so much information. Hay House's message of building a platform to get your books out really was appropriate for probably when they wrote it, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. But today, I built a wonderful platform. About the time the book was released, I think there were about 4,000 people in the group. I had a couple of thousand Twitter followers. And those platforms didn't hardly sell more than a handful of books. Right. And at one point I'm thinking about the Twitter goes by so fast that eventually only 3 or 4 people were ever seeing a post I put on. I've almost completely abandoned it. People weren't seeing that much even in the Facebook groups and things like that, because Facebook is about making money from people and advertising, and so they don't show much more than they need to, especially if you put a link to somewhere outside of Facebook on it. And I'm thinking, do I abandon this group? I was posting, and other people were posting daily quote pictures with beautiful, powerful messages to remind people about love. And I suddenly realized that that was a ministry in itself. There's people in countries, 110 countries now that group has people in. And there's people in countries, Pakistan, even 1 or 2 people in China, even though it's censored. I don't know how they get on there, you know. Different people in different countries around that probably never get a chance to see those messages. So I've carried on every day posting those messages just because love said, post the messages, you know. And I wrote that book. And actually in 2.5 months, the complete book, which is called Love, Sex, Nakedness, and the Divine, written. And it took another month waiting for people to write some bits in the foreword. It came out, I think it's June, as a finished book. Wow. It's available worldwide now.
Amazing.
The website, quick plug for the website. It's www.flybacktolove.com.
And what was the beginning of that?
www.flybacktolove.com.
Great stuff. So that's where you can find Keith and his books.
Yeah. And you can find me on Facebook, Keith Higgs. And I think I come up first in every search on Facebook. I'm Keith Higgs 1.
And what was the response to that last book? Because that's another intersection between sexuality and spirituality that isn't a comfortable fit.
I know.
For a lot of people.
I've had people say, oh, yes, I like the love, the divine, not quite so sure, and sex, oh, no, especially younger people. And I said, well, if it wasn't for the sex and nakedness, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
They smile and think, interesting. You know?
I'm surprised you get that from younger people.
Even from younger people at times, yes.
Oh, even? I thought you said especially from younger people.
No, even from younger people.
Right.
All of those words have got taboos attached. Almost because this world doesn't want us to find the beautiful purity and truth of those things. It's a struggle getting books into the hands of people nowadays. I'm the same. I used to only ever have one book by my bedside that wasn't read, and decided I wouldn't get any more until I'd read that one. Now, unfortunately, on my bookshelf, there's a whole one shelf of unread books, which probably, unfortunately, will never get read.
Right, yeah.
And people are the same. They say, I couldn't get another book. So I've got audiobooks and ebooks as well, by the way, of each of the books.
Right.
I listen to audio tapes, not tapes anymore, of course.
No.
Anytime I go on a long journey.
Right.
Rather than listen to the news or radio stations that might put stuff in that you don't want to listen to, it'll be podcasts or audio books. Anytime I go on a long journey. Because it's a beautiful feeding way to learn and grow.
Yeah.
And get others' opinions, just like your talks here.
Yeah.
It's so important to listen to other opinions. Otherwise, we get so in our own little shell.
Yeah.
Nothing breaks through.
I guess that's something about social media, that it requires a conscious effort on our part to listen to something that's outside our little comfort bubble.
Yes.
Yeah. So out of the title of your book, I'm interested in nakedness, because that sounds, or to me, it conjures up both physical nakedness and also the vulnerability of opening yourself to express what's really going on inside you. Is that how you've interpreted it?
Definitely. Nakedness actually was one of the toughest things in the book. I had a few pieces, very few, and I asked Spirit towards the very end, give me one more thing on nakedness. And the next morning, and also there was a question in my mind at the same time, help me understand more about how we can be one, an individual, and how we can be many.
Right.
And the next morning I woke up and Spirit was there faithfully with a message, which is, come unto me in your nakedness.
Say it again.
Come unto me in your nakedness.
Right.
And it's almost a meditation. I'd like to, if it's possible, read it to you.
Yeah, go for it.
You're going to have to cut here because I've got to run and get it because I hadn't thought of that before.
Okay, all right.
Quick cut.
Cool, all right.
Only take a few seconds. Okay.
Cool, and breathe.
Okay. So this is Come to Me. And before each of the sections, or most of the sections in the book, there's a quote from somebody else. So the quote here is, the greatest nakedness lies between the intimacy of two minds. It's a quote from Pavana.
Who's Pavana?
Good question. I haven't managed to find out.
Right, okay.
In the morning, come to me. in the purity of your nakedness. Close your eyes, shut down the noise of life, and discover a hidden world beyond your senses. There is all joy and all beauty here. All things are seen, and nothing is left unseen. You are naked, and yet clothed in pure love. There is no shame in love. Love sees all and still loves. I see you and all your thoughts, even though they are not real. And yes, you are still my beloved. It's impossible to hide, so why are you so fearful? Love loves the unlovely and casts its veil over countless sins. You, in your purity, are sinless. The concept you call sin is impossible here. Sin is impossible for the actual being which is a part of me. There is nothing but love within. Is a dream a sin? Falling short is just staying in that lower dream world for a while. They say sin is missing the mark, the Most High, but how can you miss the Most High when you are a part of me, my begotten, my love? You think you can hide, but love sees everything and still loves. Uncover your heart. Know that all you see with your earthbound senses is just a part of that dream. I can see all. I can raise you up and open your heart and the eye of your spirit. A lotus blossom, come into my world. First of all, know that you're naked and still loved. In fact, I would have nothing less. Leave all your shames and fears behind, back in the dream. Come, step into my realm. Don't seek to hide in the corner under the false covering of pride. Come back to me in the knowledge of your true beauty and magnificence, my lover, my friend, in a realm where all is seen, all is known, and we are one. Let's dance together in the light, loving together and in eternity of love, living together in that heavenly mansion of absolute knowing. One, and yet also many more, like the mystery of a wave and a particle. We are one and also many, dancing, knowing, exploring and growing. Your earthly mind fears that you will wake up back in the dream. No, there is no end, and I am forever here in the moments you slip into reality, far away from forgetfulness. I am ever awaiting, my love, for you to put all illusions down. Come back soon, in the light of another morning. The blissful moments will never end. In truth, they are all that is. We're naked together forever in the arms of love. Sleep now, and thus wake up. Your illusions are just for a moment. Real life is on the other side of the veil. I love you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Mm.
That mystery of a wave and a particle.
Yes, oh yes, I love that.
Quantum physics. That was the answer to my question. Show us more.
Yes.
When we look with one set of eyes and one set of beliefs, we are particle, we're individuals. When we look with the other set of spiritual eyes, we're all one.
And we're both at the same time. That's the
and
magic
it is
of
both at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. The other thing that really struck me there was the nature of sin, and how the message I got from that was sin was, or it matches with what I've heard before, which is sin comes from the Latin word to be without or to forget. So that the sin is just a forgetting of who we really are and our connection with God, rather than anything we've done wrong or anything that we'll be punished for, or judged badly for.
That's a big message from the Course in Miracles as well. I don't know if you've ever looked at that.
I haven't. I got it like years ago and did like day one.
Well, they say it's the most unread book because people, especially the book now is in the 3 parts, but the first part is so deep and so woo-woo almost, and so especially couched in Christian language. Right. People pick it up and never read it. It's the most purchased book and the most unread book of all, you know.
Well, I'm one of them.
I started, I had it, I'd read some, I don't know quite what it was, and I haven't found it again, but a couple of beautiful messages, which was the Course in Miracles, but just kind of boiled down into a love message, you know, and I love that. Right. I had, like you, picked up the book and thought, oh no, and it sat around for years on my bookshelf. And one day I was listening to Marianne Williamson, and I read A Return to Love and loved that. And she said, I'm doing a group online workshop understanding the Course in Miracles. And I thought, that's a good idea. So I ran through that with her in October of last year.
Right.
And started the daily workbooks, work lessons, which is where everybody really should start, not at the beginning of the book.
Right.
And I'm now on day 247.
Right.
Having done it every day with a few exceptions of being on holiday or being in a workshop or something like that.
Right.
And some days doing the same day over because I didn't quite get it.
Right.
So there's another 100-ish days to go before I finish the entire year. There's a lot of learning. First is tearing down all the crap ideas and beliefs that we have, our mindset that's wrong, and then they start halfway through the book. It starts building on growing the new beliefs of being one, being love. And yes, it's couched in very Christian language. At the time, that was the language of the world when it was written.
Yeah.
But if God upsets you, you change the word to divine or whatever is a word that fits with your belief system.
Yeah. I wonder if people were asked if they believe in God / divine / all that is / love, insert here whatever word you'd like to use. I wonder how many people would say yes on the planet.
I think most people.
Yeah.
I've got that / this / that in 2 or 3 places in the first book.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Do you reckon now is a good time to take a break?
Sure.
Yeah, a wee break and a tea break, and then come back. And I've got one more question that I want to ask you, which is about how spirituality intersects with political, psychological thought. Because what I've been listening to recently is a lot of podcasts by people that I really like and admire listening to, like Sam Harris. Trying to think of someone else at the moment. There's quite a few people who are out there who are thinkers that I really want to listen to, but whenever they get onto the topic of spirituality, there's almost like this "oh, poor them" attitude. Those who are deluded enough to have a spiritual belief. There's something that it irritates me, and it's also like it saddens me that there's this veil of unbelievability, and I can't quite get the right word, but I wish there was more spirituality in those kinds of discussion, or if it was just more accepted, like, it's okay to have those thoughts, those beliefs. I don't know.
I guess some people ride their hobby horse fanatically and don't open up to different areas. For me, without spirituality, there's no point. Because that's the core of, in my world, belief system, all of us. And I guess a few people have been so turned off by religion, by the churches, by religious fanaticism, that they've hardened their hearts to anything along that line. It's interesting that Spirit talks about melting the blocks to love. And I guess that's one of the blocks to love, is the false front of various fanatical religions, various controlling. There's a beautiful message I got in Khajuraho in India, which is a World Heritage Site, with sacred temples. And it's a secret of the temples and life. And it's just quite brief, quite short, but absolutely beautiful in talking about religions, in talking about buildings, churches, and at the end of it saying that within us, our beating beautiful hearts, is the very essence of everything, the holograph of the universe inside of us.
Right. Yeah.
The holograph is actually outside of us, and everything is within.
Yes. Yeah.
And one day those blocks and things will be melted in everybody, if what I believe to be true is true.
Yeah.
In one way or another. And it might be just suddenly letting go of this life and waking up and looking down and, my God, is this really me? Is this really the universe? Is this what's real? Or maybe it'll be an awakening, a gentle awakening before. Or maybe some of those people will need that 1,000 years of heaven on earth to wake up and realize. Who knows what it's going to be and how it's going to be,
Yeah, yeah.
But I think if that's true, that we are spirits, then everybody's going to realize that one day or another, sooner or later.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And I can totally understand the desire to push religion away, that its history of being used as a power over mechanism rather than a returning to love mechanism is so.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Just imagine if Marianne Williamson does actually succeed in the goal of becoming president of the United States. What a hell of a change that would make,
Wouldn't it?
I should say,
That would be absolutely
that would be
amazing.
just absolutely amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Part of me, the first thought was, oh my God, that's impossible, the powers that be, but the power in us is greater than any power that can be.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And I think the big thing for me about Trump getting in is, like, if Trump can get in, anyone can get in.
I know. I mean, God, absolutely so.
And I don't mean that to disparage Marianne Williamson as, just some other crackpot in a different way, because that's not how I see it. But, still, the rules, the parameters, I think, have just gone out the window now.
Oh, totally, yes. Although maybe the greater powers that be thought they could control Trump. But who knows if anybody's controlling Trump, other than the crackpot inside of him.
Yeah, totally. Very intelligent little child.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's about it, isn't it? The total tantrum child,
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's at least pause there, and then shall we come back in 10 minutes and see what's there to still talk about?
Okay.
Yeah, does that sound
Sounds good?
Cool. All right.
I guess. Will you turn this off, or shall I? I'll leave it on, I guess.
Yeah, leave it on. I'll press stop recording. Pause.
Sounds good.
Record. Okay, so we're recording again, and you wanted to read something.
Yes, I was thinking we talked about this particular message, the mysteries of the temples and life, and I'd be nice to be able to read it. It's quite short, and I think it's very powerful. Again, a quote: "I looked in temples, churches, and mosques. I found the divine within my heart." It's a Rumi quote. This is a message I received while meditating in Khajuraho, India, a World Heritage Site with many beautiful old and sacred temples. I am life. Yes, throughout all ages, men have wanted to reach God, touch the divine, and feel their purpose in fulfillment. Some have seen and understood, and yet the masses have been seduced into following and giving their divinity and power to others, called to worship in temples made by hands, and give their substance to leaders, many of whom were not interested in sharing these gifts with those who needed them, and many religions have been born. Stories and parables have been created as signposts for true seekers to find. They hold many truths and also many falsehoods, created sometimes in error when passing the message, and sometimes by design seeking power, riches, and glory rather than the truth. Many beautiful buildings, though hollow edifices made of cold stone, yet often also symbols and pictures there for true seekers to find. Yet you are the temple of God or of life. The very spark of life is entrusted to you, beating within every cell of your body. Yes, the entire universe is within you. Everything in the outer world is recorded in the universe of every cell of your being. Rejoice You are the being of God. Now, sadly, many have turned the meaning of that word, and it has been buried under the prejudice created by false gods and false delusions of a wrathful, angry, judgmental deity whose pleasure it is to punish the wicked. But can you find that truth inside your beautiful beating heart? The life-giving joy that can erupt within you after throwing off the shackles of guilt. That guilt was put there by those seeking to control you, to keep you in bondage and blind to the truth. God is love, is light, is life. Feel the power of that life within and know that the whole of you is pulsating with the vibrations of the entire cosmos, that nothing can destroy the energy of that love itself, which continues long after the earthly vehicle and the illusion even of a physical temple has crumbled into the death of the ages. Look deep inside. Connect with that eternal being which is you and life itself, and live.
Beautiful. Amen to that. And aho and all the other phrases as well. Yeah, beautiful. So where was that from?
That was from the first book,
Right.
which is called
Back to love.
Take Control of Your Spacecraft and Fly Back to Love, a manual and guidebook for life's journey.
Beautiful. I like that. I like that image of, like, you know, coming down in this spacesuit, this spaceship, and being like, what do we do now? Oh, there's a manual. Great.
Well, they didn't give us a manual, you know, for this life. And yet there are a number of manuals around of people. Of course, the difficulty is discerning which is the one that fits with you. And
Yeah, or taking bits and pieces from all sorts of different sources.
Life will lead you to the book or the books or the messages or the quotes that speak to your heart, your beautiful heart.
Yeah.
Destiny will take you back to that place of love that you are. If that's all it is, then there's no place else than that in real truth.
Yes, yeah. That feels right to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, could you read that Rumi quote again at the beginning? Because I think that taps into something very pertinent to now.
Yes. I looked in temples, churches, and mosques. I found the divine within my heart.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I love it that the Sufi mystics had, or he had, an awareness that all these different religions have at their core an awareness that the divine is in our hearts and is in everyone equally. And I think a lot of the religious doctrines that have tried to separate out one religion from another or one sect from another, well, that's really up at the moment, especially in the UK, hey, with the discombobulation, if you like, between Christianity or a culture, a society that's been founded on Christianity, among other things. And lots of Muslim people who have joined our country in the last, 20-ish years. And the challenges of that, about two doctrines meeting head on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've just finished an interesting book, which has just come out very recently, called The Hippie by Paulo Coelho. And it's his autobiography of his early years when he first was in Brazil and being arrested and tortured, and his journey into Europe and the start of his trip to Nepal with a lady. And he finished that journey in Turkey, where he was looking for the whirling dervishes of the Sufis.
Right.
And met this very wise man in almost a derelict building, who he spent a few days with, just going to meet him every day and learning about some of the traditions of Sufis. And the same message was there. No, you don't need to become a Sufi. Mm-hmm. Just follow your heart. Take time to listen and look and explore life.
Yes.
Of course, he went on to be an amazing author with lots of beautiful messages, like The Alchemist, about finding one's purpose.
Yeah, beautiful. It's that same message of sovereignty, isn't it? Yeah. And the one thing I appreciated about my shamanic teacher more than anything else was that he started off by saying, I'm going to teach you everything I know and believe, but you have to use your discernment to decide what you take on and what you don't. And if anyone ever tells you that you need to believe this or you're damned in any terminology, then like as you said, turn around and go the other way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so what's next for Keith Higgs? You've got 3 books underneath your belt. Where do you go from here?
I go into each day with a desire to be used, to serve, to help people find what they need. I don't know what's next.
Right.
Yes, I've made a few plans for the next few months with booking a few festivals, because I've found like-minded people there that I can talk to, communicate with, and often get a chance to share some of my books.
Mm-hmm.
Next, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to enjoy what I consider being paradise, which is having a snorkel on top of a coral reef in the warm sea.
Wow.
I'm going to spend a week in Myanmar, well, just in the archipelago at the edge of Myanmar in the Andaman Sea, on a catamaran with probably 2 crew and possibly up to 6 other people, just enjoying the beauty of the sunsets, the storms, the coral reef, the warmth. Because it's getting a bit cold and grey here in England. It's time to go somewhere warm for a little while.
Good move.
And who knows who I'll meet and where life will take me. And we don't know at the beginning of each day what magic can unfold. But if we're seeking magic, if we're seeking connection, that's what love will give us, I'm sure.
Beautiful. Yeah. And that feels like a great note to end on, because it feels like that's exactly what's happened here today.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Keith, for coming on Cat Conversations and having this dialogue with me. It's been really beautiful. I feel really light and settled in my body, having had this conversation with you. Beautiful.
I've enjoyed it too. Thank you. And thanks to everybody that listens.
Great stuff.
If you do want to connect with me, www.flybacktolove.com is the book's website, or meet me on Facebook, Ask to Be Friends. If you're a like-minded person, I'd love to know you too.
Beautiful. Great stuff. So we'll put all the links underneath the video as well.
Oh, brilliant. That's wonderful.
Yeah, so people can find you and everything we've talked about as well, maybe. Cool. All right. Loads of love. Thank you.
I love getting to know you better again, even more, you know.